offense clearly needs an outside X receiver. Where does KC go from here, Matt Harmon?
Like, I'm looking at outside receiver as a complete blank slate, and I would be aggressive. We should be adding multiple bodies here. We should be adding multiple bodies at this position and multiple different types too.
Look at the release.
There's your separation.
Great route.
Stutter and go. Gets by clean.
That is unbelievable.
Maybe the greatest catch I've ever seen.
Kansas City, man, golly, they've got some needs here. They've got some needs. But again, this is what I want to talk to you about. Where does Kansas City go from here? Because they've got a couple of key pieces here that could potentially be on the move. Their offense clearly needs an outside X receiver. Put your GM hat on for me for just a second here. Where does KC go from here, Matt Harmon?
Yeah, $24 million in cap space. Like I said, they do have some decisions there on that defensive side of the football. I think specifically on offense, yeah, I think you got a great season out of Rashee Rice. I think Rashee Rice is going to be a fascinating player to discuss and debate in the offseason, depending on what else happens in Kansas City. If you're not subscribed to my YouTube page, you should do that because there's content on there now that's not on this podcast feed, specifically the mailbag segment that I launched last week where I talked a lot about Rashee Rice and how he sort of compares to Amon-Ra St. Brown from a rookie year perception standpoint. So definitely go check that out. But regardless, like we know typically, unless that archetype of player is going to break out to the point that we now have with Amon-Ra St. Brown, where, I mean, he's doing everything. And, you know, it just maybe Rashee Rice does that, maybe he doesn't. You still need outside vertical presences in your offense. And if I'm Kansas City, I'm definitely looking at that outside receiver position as a complete blank slate. Like, I'm looking at outside receiver as a complete blank slate, and I would be aggressive, right? Like, I would be
totally.
I don't know who you're calling in like a trade situation. I don't know who's going to be on the market, but you know, that would certainly be, you know, I mean, I'd call San Francisco, see what's up with Brandon Ayuk. I don't think Ayuk is going to be available, like a team that's this much in their contender window. But at some point, San Francisco is going to have a salary squeeze on that offensive side of the ball. We'll talk about them more in just a second. But I'd be kicking around the idea of who can I add in free agency, you know, and like even if you don't get a big fish like a T. Higgins or a Mike Evans.
Mike Evans, right.
That wouldn't stop me from still adding bodies like Calvin Ridley or like a Curtis Samuel, guys that we've seen play outside receiver before and can really thrive in that position, because I do think we should be adding multiple bodies here. We should be adding multiple bodies at this position and multiple different types too. That's the big thing is you can use an X. Well, shoot, you can use like a zone beating flanker. I mean, he's not going to be available this year, but like a Jacoby Myers type would be a great addition for them. Guys with size and ability to beat man coverage have to be at a premium for Kansas City this year, and I think they should throw resources both in free agency and in the draft at that problem. And they should also be doing the same at left tackle as well. They're probably locked into Juwan Taylor just based on the contract they gave him last year, but they should certainly be looking at offensive tackle as well, because I would argue that those two issues, the receiver issue and the pass protection at the tackle positions, the penalties at the tackle position, those two issues compounded on each other this past year, and you can't have that happen 2 years in a row.
It definitely feels as if they're going to have to make a choice, though. You can't, with their salary cap situation, you can't address both wide receiver and offensive line. It's going to be really, really tough. And what Kansas City has done, at least certainly in recent drafts, is they're like, all right, you know what? Or in recent off seasons, is that they're going to address the offensive line and just ask Mahomes to make it work with some of his pass catchers. And can you really they just won a Super Bowl with this equation. You know? So they might be motivated to do that again. I almost wonder if you could go backwards, like go attack it from the other position, where if you have an outside X receiver and you pair him with, you know, Travis Kelce, and you pair him with, you know, the other weapons that you've got, does that almost solve the O-line problem in and of itself? Because defenses now are going to be like, well, we really can't bring pressure. Otherwise, we're going to get absolutely torched over the top, you know? So those two things do work together.
Yeah, I wonder if they, Tyron Smith is a free agent from the Cowboys this year. He probably could get a huge bag from somebody, but,
Right.
or do they maybe think about spending money at that position? Because, look, as much as I say, like, T. Higgins and Mike Evans, I don't think those guys are realistically going to hit the market. It's number one receivers just don't hit free agency. And I think both of T. Higgins, you can quibble about, and we'll quibble about it if he does eventually change teams at some point. But those guys just don't really hit the market. Like Michael Pittman's not going to hit the market. Maybe Calvin Ridley hits the market, but still, I think you can still add a lower tier free agent. But then really, I do think their solution at wide receiver and where I would really be aggressive is in the draft. I do think they need to alter the way they view the receiver position. And what I mean by that is, we don't need as many of these gimmicky types. We don't need another Hardman. We don't need another Kadarius Toney. We don't need another Sky Moore. I think Rashee Rice was an inspired pick because he profiled as an X receiver based on what he was doing in college, but then they completely reimagined and changed that role for him and made him more of an in-breaking guy, a slot player. That was great to see, but I think we need to return sort of to like the traditional outside receiver mold, and that's where I think they need to focus, not like some of these project gadgety guys. And it sounds like there'll be plenty of guys available in the draft this year to do that. I think of a guy like Brian Thomas, who we talked about at one point in the draft process. Big guy, can run a handful of routes, but one of those handful of routes as a vertical player in the Chiefs offense is exactly what they need. So it's going to require a trade up to get into that group of players. But even still, I think that would be something I would explore if I was Kansas City, because you're going to get weaker on the defensive side of the football. That's just how defense works, and you're probably going to lose at least one player on that side, if not two guys, in Snead and Chris Jones. So I would be aggressive in thinking all right, let me find my outside number one receiver to go along with Rice and the last few years here of Kelce.
How about Hollywood Brown?
See, that just doesn't do it for me. I don't need a speed guy here.
A lot of interesting names certainly out there. If they wanted to go the old route, let's see what Odell Beckham's got left in the tank. Probably give him a small deal if he wanted to come through. I don't know where Kendrick Bourne would be in his recovery from injury. But he's like a totally throwaway type contract that you could have and see what kind of upside you get right there too. But yeah, certainly I think there's some names out there that they could get in free agency that I don't think would impact their cap space all that much. And what's great about where Kansas City is at right now in the need for wide receiver is the fact that this is a very deep wide receiver draft as well. So a lot of interesting names out there, certainly. We talked about the Michael Pittmans and the Mike Evanses of the world and T. Higginses of the world. But in the draft and certainly lower level free agents too, this is actually a pretty deep wide receiver group that's available to the Kansas City Chiefs in the offseason. But it's like I said, they might try to use that money and address the O-line. As they have been trying to do here over the last few years.